Welcome to Finance at the Jobsite, the podcast where construction finance meets the field. I'm your host, Rishi founder of Being Human. In each episode, I sit down with construction CFOs, controllers, owners, project managers, IT leaders, ERP consultants, and industry experts to uncover how they connect the back office with the field, choose and implement technology, manage cash flow, and drive profitable projects. Whether you are running the numbers, leading the team, or designing the systems that keep projects moving, this is your place to learn what's working, what's broken, and what's next in construction finance. Today, our guest is Margie Morris. Margie, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
First section here is on your career and industry expertise. You've spent your entire career in the surety business, from underwriting to becoming a partner at Guignard Company. What has kept you in the industry for so long, and what continues to inspire you work today?
Well, yes, I have spent my entire career in the surety industry, and there have been times where I thought I was going to get out of it, but then it always brought me rooted back to being in construction. I love construction. My family was in construction. My husband's family was in construction. Just being around it my entire life, but every day is different. Every client is different. Every project is different. And I really, truly thrive on being that advisor for my clients, helping them map out their plans and winning projects and just being part of their team. And I think just the diversity of it, you come in every day and it's something new every single day.
Yeah, construction is such a dynamic business. Lots of risk
Yes. And rewards.
and rewards too. How did your early underwriting experience at Reliance and Travelers shape the way you advise contractors today?
So when I worked as a company underwriter, I feel like that was so invaluable. You know, I got my finance degree and MBA, and then going to work for a surety company, they offered, a training program where I learned how to underwrite, how to evaluate construction companies. I was with the best of the best, from that standpoint. They taught me how to read the underwriting files, learn how to build relationships with the contractors and not just look at paper. You got to look beyond the paper. They offered resources and education and exposed me to small up and coming contractors to large national contractors, understood the claims process if a contractor hits the skids, what happens then. So it's almost its own MBA in itself when you get that opportunity to sit on the underwriting side and learn how to put an account on the books and watch it go through its from beginning to end with a contractor. So it was just invaluable, the amount of experience and knowledge that you get from, around the country. Travelers is national and global, and just the experience overall was just, like I said, it's invaluable. It's its own MBA, they call it.
Yeah, actually, I have not done an MBA, but I read a book called Personal MBA,
There you go.
and that helped me think like an MBA somewhat. So, similar to me, you got your MBA through Travelers and Reliance.
Yes. When you talk about having that opportunity to, just spend that time, years of just collaborating like that, it's just, you see a lot.
You frequently speak to construction and trade organizations as an industry expert. What topics resonate most with contractors right now?
I love this question because whenever I meet with my clients, I always ask them what's keeping them up at night. And the two things that constantly are in the forefront of a contractor's mind is labor and continuity. And so both of those can hurt you if you want to grow because you need the labor force to help you grow. So you can only get the jobs that you can have the labor to complete the projects. So labor is definitely an issue. And then continuity. A lot of these contractors could start out being just a single owner who has built a team and now is looking to how do I transition this team? So, and as you met contractors, they're very prideful and do have a hard time letting go. So, continuity and the labor is the key.
Yeah. So when you say continuity, you mean selling the business to maybe a private equity or another owner? Is that what you're
Could
thinking?
be, yeah. As when you're a own your own business, you look at who's behind you and you build this legacy. Do you have family in the business? Do you have people in the business? What happens to that owner? You want the company to continue. So the owner is always looking at who is going to take this over, or do you just wind it down and, close up shop? And that's the end of it. And so they're always looking at, everybody thinks they're invincible when they're in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, but once they hit their 50s, they start looking around going, "Oh, oh, I'm halfway through the that roadway, and the rearview mirror is going to get longer, and the and the front windshield's going to get shorter."
Wow, I love that analogy with the car, the mirrors. The next section here is on surety fundamentals and contractor readiness. What are the biggest misunderstandings contractors have about surety bonding, especially as they grow?
I think all the questions you gave me were great today because I feel like the biggest misunderstanding as I talk to contractors is they think that getting surety credit is an arduous task, and it truly isn't. If you really understand how to do surety, then you know how to ask the right questions to the contractor, get the right information, drag it out. And so I think, the misconception of it being like a doctor's exam. It is not that. And I think the other thing is how important a sound accounting department is. A lot of times, a growing construction company, the last thing they want to add is overhead, right? And so,
Hmm.
in the accounting department, in their eyes, is overhead. And so they'll spend money on an estimator, they'll spend money on a project manager, and admin, but the accounting department is crucial to a construction company, especially when it comes to surety bonding.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as the growth is coming, it's very easy to see like you need more project managers, estimators, laborers on the field, but it's very difficult to see that you also need more accountants.
Yes. I mean, once you're an established contractor, we call it the three C's. If you pass the character and the capability, then it comes down to capital, and you have to prove that capital through your financial reporting. And if your financial reporting isn't there, that can kind of prohibit you from growing your job sizes because the surety relies on that financial reporting to extend that credit or expand on larger projects. So the owners have a hard time dipping in their pocket to spend 10, 20, $30,000 on getting a proper financial statement. But then it comes back tenfold once they do. It is fun to watch it as they squirm and then they finally cave in and they do, and they're like, "Oh, why didn't I do it sooner?"
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it makes so much sense. How do you explain the real role a surety partner plays, not just in bonding capacity, but as an advisor on financial strength and risk?
Okay. So I always say that anybody who understands surety can write a bond, issue a bond. They can issue a bid bond. They can issue a performance and payment bond. But that's like a given. That's like getting up and brushing your teeth every day. It's a given. It goes beyond that. It's the maintenance of it. My role as that surety partner is I'm the go-between the contractor and the surety. My role is to make sure that I align the contractor with a surety that buys into the contractor's business plan. So it's really important that I understand the contractor's business plan and I understand what they're wanting to go after, and that I do my due diligence and bring in the right surety company that's going to buy into it. A contractor can't get to a surety company without going through somebody like myself. And so I have to be able to make sure that that contractor understands what the surety is looking for when they approve a bond to approving a program. So I have to be able to relay that information back to that contractor and just bridge the gap between the surety's expectations and the contractor's needs. And if the contractor's needs are, I want to grow to 100 million, I don't want to surprise the surety and say, well, they're only doing 20 million and now they want to do 100. There has to be a plan on that. So I advise the contractor on what they need to do in order to reach their goals in all capacity. And so I wear a lot of hats. Like I have to know enough about legal, enough about accounting, enough about banking, all the external partners so I can help my client match up to, they tell me they're searching for a new bank. I can say, well, here are 3 or 4 banks that love construction contractors. Here are, 3 CPA firms if you're looking for a new CPA that are construction oriented and are approved by the surety companies. So my job is to be able to advise my client in all those facets to ensure that, I point out the risks. If they decide they want to pull a ton of money out of the company and it's going to strip the balance sheet, I have to be able to tell them you can't do that. Or you have too much money in the company and you might want to consider doing something different. So it's a lot of things. My clients call me for many different things, and that's the best part about my job is that they do view me as a partner with them. Because a lot of
Yeah.
times these owners don't, it's just the single owner and they're on an island by themselves, right? And so having that sounding board that's not influenced internally, it's a step back that can help them look at all the angles in making those decisions.
Yeah. And the construction owners, most of the time they got into construction to actually build things, estimate, project manage risk. So it's kind of tough to see all these angles that someone like you bring onto the table that an owner may not have.
Well, another thing I think is important is that, and you said it, is contractors are in the business to build things, not to lose. If they get into a bad job and there's a default, or there's like a sub goes under, or many different things, I have to help them understand their obligation to the surety if there is a default or if there is a claim of some sort, and to keep them in good standing with the surety company.
What financial or operational indicators do you look at first when evaluating whether a contractor is set up for sustainable growth?
Well, the first thing I look at obviously is who they are as a company, their experience, their team, who's part of the organization. And then after that it comes down to what does the financial wherewithal look like? What's the quality and the timeliness of their financial reporting, both internally and, externally? Does their internal accounting team have construction CPA, understand GAAP, or look at, are they a bookkeeper or are they a controller, CFO level? And, so that will help them in where they want to go with the company. And even the external CPA, if you have your year-end, say December, you don't provide your year-end statement until July. Well, that's a long time. And it's like you're questioning both sides, like, what's the delay? Well, we can't get the information from the client. And then the client's like, the CPA is not doing their job. And really the meet in the middle. And it's, you have this bookkeeper that doesn't understand what they need to give to the CPA. So it really, that's the biggest thing is, that can keep them from growing.
How do you resolve that kind of situation where, like, the internal bookkeeper is saying the CPA is not doing their job, the CPA is saying that the internal bookkeeper is not doing their job?
They're not fun conversations, but goes back to communication is so critical. And so my job is to really understand how far does the contractor want to grow? What kind of bonding capacity are they looking for? And up front, my job is to say, for this type of bonding program, here's the path to get there. This is what you're going to need to do and to be able to do that. And so it's just a lot of communication, bringing potentially a bridge between this, because the CPA can only do so much to where to have an arm's length relationship there. So it might be bringing in like a fractional CFO that can kind of help, that accounting department to, set up, proper accounting systems or reports that the surety company relies on. If you're an active contractor bidding projects all the time, the surety really only needs to see those financials maybe quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. But internally, they should be looking at their financials monthly, right? They should be closing everything out monthly, because what the contractor business owner looks at from a financial statement isn't what we look at. We're looking at two different things. They're looking at bottom line, and then we're looking at balance sheet, all sorts of stuff, the work on hand. And so you'll always hear the contractor say, I never look at my CPA statement. I just hand it over to the surety because they want it.
Yeah, makes sense. The next section here is on growth, transitions, and strategic moves. You've helped companies expand, buy businesses, sell businesses, and transition ownership. Which of these transitions create the most pressure on bonding and why?
It's a great one because I've been involved in all of it, all of the above. If it's not a well thought out and plan and discussed with, with myself or the surety, I look at, it's a constant conversation that we have with our clients. What is your continuity plan? And it's not about how, it's nothing more than if it's a single owner or multiple owners, we're always asking the question because they're getting older. So, and sureties base everything on relationships. In that case is when they sell a company, if they decide to sell a company, you're not just selling the company. Now you got new owners in. And so the surety has to now decide, is this owner just as good as the previous owner, right? Because they don't know them. I mean, I had a situation where the contractor sold his company to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor was like, we need bonds. And it's like, well, time out. Where's your experience? Like the surety and I were looking at each other like, this isn't going to work. So, having those conversations up front and often, are important so you can hear where the client's head is. And then that's my job to help identify what could be some good options for them.
Actually, what is your job title?
Jack of all trades. No. My I'm a partner of my agency. However, I am an advisor, a surety advisor to my clients. So I think my title, I really can't like put my finger on a title. I just view it as I love helping my clients and helping them through their lifespan of their construction company. So, I know what triggers a surety company, and surety companies are like auditors, in my opinion, or the IRS. They get very nervous and they need a buffer. And so that's my job, is to make sure I'm bringing clients to them that are solid construction companies. It's all different sizes. So I think that sureties don't like to be surprised. So if all of a sudden my client doesn't tell me they sold their business, and then the surety and I go and visit them and they say, oh, I sold my business, we'd all be like, what? Like, what happened? So I go back to having communication is so critical. And that's really my biggest job, is meeting my clients often, just popping in or calling them and learning what's new, what are the highs and the lows, what's going on if they have a problem project going on and it's a bond problem project, let's get in front of it. So it's just asking those right questions.
When a contractor is planning rapid growth, what common financial pitfalls do you see that could jeopardize bonding capacity?
Two things that I think about is when you have a lot of projects that are coming out of the ground right at the same time, cash flow is the biggest concern, right? Because you're laying out and shelling out a ton of cash, and that's where you see a ton of contractor failure, is that they just don't have the cash flow to get the projects going, getting them off the ground. Another pitfall that I see is that now they have to hire new people that doesn't understand their core values, how they run projects, and now you're putting them on your biggest projects or because you didn't have enough people and now you're hiring new people. Those can be huge financial pitfalls because you're now paying a lot of money for somebody that you have no idea if they can perform or not. And so I would say those are the two biggest, the cash flow and because it's easy to build up a company, but when you have to take it down, it's very hard to unwind a company. And so, so you have to plan for, hey, we're going to do X amount, and then you're looking at the infrastructure. Well, how do you plan to get there? What do you need? What kind of staffing are you going to need to help with this? And the best ones are when they say, we just need an admin. We have the people, we have the experience, and they've been with us a long time, but maybe we just need a project superintendent, or an assistant of some sort. So, it's really understanding that their business plan is in alignment with what they're targeting.
What does a contractor need to have in place before even considering an ESOP or private equity arrangement?
A very good understanding of the pros and cons and the benefits of both is key. You don't want to just jump in on either one, and it takes a lot of time. And so do you have the right person that is going to help you gather the information to go through either process? And so it kind of goes back to that accounting department. You're going to have to, obviously, you don't want to tell your employees that, hey, I'm considering this or that until you have an idea. So you have to have some very good confidence
Mm-hmm.
that you can rely on that's going to help you gather the information. So you're going to have to earmark the time. So if you're busy on projects and if you're a hands-on contractor, then you're wanting to do this, you have to carve out the time to gather it because they both take time to go through the process. And one could be better than the other. And if you want the right people that are going to help walk you through both and not just chase a commission check, and they're out there. So
Yeah. It's such a precision, ESOP versus private equity. Actually, the next section's on ESOPs, private equity, and ownership changes. ESOPs and private equity deals are becoming more common in construction. From a bonding perspective, what makes an ESOP work and where do they often fall apart?
So yes, both ESOPs and private equity deals are becoming more common. And before I comment on this, what's interesting is ESOPs way back when the sureties got really weird about them, and then private equity came around, and then the sureties are like, oh, we really like ESOPs over private equity. What makes an ESOP work and where do they often fall apart? I would say they work when there's a strong management team that's been with the company for years, and maybe they can't afford to buy the owner out because the valuation is, so large that, the ESOP might be the better route because they have this management team, a new president that can, you know, continue the vision of the company, I think is very important. So if you have those employees that have been with you for a long time, and that could be a great exit strategy. And I think the biggest part is the things where I've seen, and I have 8 or 9 ESOPs in my portfolio now, and probably half of them came in the last, 24 months. So, and I have seen an couple ESOPs in my career and that haven't gone well. And where they haven't gone well is that the valuation was way overvalued. And the way they were going to pay off the ESOP note was through this advanced, revenue growth. If the company's only doing 25 million a year, and now it's showing that they're going to do 50 million a year, it's like, wait a minute, you're banking on that to help you pay for this ESOP, and that's not a good. I think the other thing about an ESOP is you have what's called seller notes and lender notes. And so when you look at an ESOP, you can do 100% ESOP, you can do a partial ESOP, and you just don't want all that to be outside money that you're now having to pay. You want to have a good balance on that. I think that the highlights is making sure it's a realistic valuation. So it's important to pick your team that's
Mm-hmm.
going to be doing that because they get excited. The client contractors get excited when they think, oh, I can get $30 million in my pocket. So
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be all about that. And then not realize, well, okay, how am I going to pay? How is that going to work?
Yeah, yeah. It's sometimes when the contractors and these businesses, idea of just thinking about being able to exit cleanly is just fascinating.
It really is. I would say an inflated valuation and no internal management team to help get that paid back is going to be where it can blow up.
When private equity enters the picture, how does that change the way sureties assess risk and continuity?
So earlier I mentioned that surety is very relationship driven. So sureties want to have a relationship with the contractor, the owners of the business. They want a long-term relationship for years and years to come. Private equity is more short-term.
Mhm.
Private equities come in, they're quick to sell. There's a lot of financial debt, no indemnification. At that point, there's no real relationship. And so they're doable. I can tell you they get written and a lot of sureties do write them, but they're on I think what the contractor doesn't realize on the back end that they don't see is that the private equity may have had to put collateral or do some things to ensure that this is a doable deal for the surety. And so it's more of the short term vision of the private equity. So the sureties always want to know, well, how long are you going to retain this company? And they are hard to write, but they are writable. And so, you know,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's
I was saying private equity is such a different kind of business model. Yeah, they're like definitely looking to make money maybe in 5 years. Buy business right now, sell it in 5 years.
and most of
Uh,
the time
Good.
the core of that construction company is gone from that standpoint. So most of the time, the CFO of the construction company is let go. So they just strip it down, and which is that's just how it is. So you have to, as a business owner, you have to be okay with. I always say, if you don't care about your people, and you have no one to give it to, then private equity is the way to go.
Yeah. What advice do you give owners who are considering succession but aren't sure which path, ESOP, sale, or internal transition is right for them?
Again, the biggest thing for a business owner is making sure that they have trusted external advisors. And I mean their CPA, their banker, their bonding, their insurance. We're their advisors. They hired us to, you know, provide them their surety for insurance to get them the best insurance, banking to give them the best. So their advisors should be supportive and helping them go through vetting out which way to go. And so I always look at, again, when we talk about succession planning, it's really understanding who is part of their team. If it's a husband and wife and they don't have anybody to pass it down to, or they're just, that's not an ESOP opportunity, right? It could be better to sell to a bigger company that does what they do, or it could be if it's just one person that has been with them or family, they can do an internal transition. But you really have to know what the company is made up of and who their team is. And so I would say that the owner should reach out to their different advisors, maybe bring them all in at one time or just a few of them, like the account CPA and the surety agent, and just say, this is what I'm thinking, because a lot of CPA firms have a great model and can run numbers and we can lay out different things for them to give them an idea of which way to go. So
The external advice is sometimes They can be very valuable.
The contractor I mentioned earlier in our conversation, I had told you that he sold his company to a chiropractor, and he was older. Like he was, when I say older, he was like almost 80. And my conversation with him was he had no one to pass it down to. And so I said, why do you want to continue it? I said, wouldn't you rather wind this company down and leave a solid legacy? And I know that was a hard thing to say to him, but the alternative created more heartache. And, that company's no longer around. So it kind of just, all his hard work just like blew up in a matter of, we probably was better off just winding the company down.
Actually, I'm really not sure how you wind down a construction company. What would you have to do to wind down a construction company?
So you would want to keep your key employees engaged, probably provide an incentive plan to keep them involved, and you don't bid new work. You just work on finishing the jobs that you have underway, and then you just slowly start at that point. And again, it's really just in making sure that the people that are going to stay on with you are incentivized, to complete the projects, you know, and then create a bonus for them to where they, when it's all said and done, there's money there for them to have time to go look for something else at that point.
Like I'm thinking assets and equipments, they can be hard to get rid of.
They can. I mean, you have to look at all your lease obligations, if you own the equipment versus, so it, when I say you wind down a company, it can take a year or two to wind down a company because it's methodical. It's just about as methodical as if you want to build a company, right? So it's just the reverse.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense. The last section here is on financial strength, WIP, and cash flow discipline. Bonding decisions rely heavily on financials. What are the top three financial habits of the strongest contractors you work with?
Okay. So one is having a CFO or controller that's important, understands construction accounting, and can provide timely internal financial reporting. Those are the clients that I work with have CFOs or strong controllers in their company. They give me quarterly internals. They give me annual CPA review or audit, and that's what makes from that standpoint, because you can go and get the work, right? You can go and bid the work and get the work, but
Mm.
you've got to be able to know where you are with the job, right? And that's where the accounting department comes into play. And the accounting department they see the cash in, that cash out, and what's needed. So you need someone to help manage that.
Very good ones. How important is disciplined WIP reporting when it comes to bonding capacity? And what do you see contractors repeatedly getting wrong?
Well, accurate WIP reporting is critical, and not just accurate, but that it doesn't look like the stock market. So if you have a job that's doing like this
Mhm.
all along the way, then there's something going on, right? Like you don't know what it is, but you have to. it- I view the WIP as, I look at it this way: the WIP is your report card to the surety company. It shows your open and closed jobs. So it's going to show the jobs when they start, and it's going to show the job on the close WIP when they finish. And if you can show projects that are constantly, closing out close to their budget, and your profit margins are pretty steady, your job is perfect. So you're going to have some busts here and there, but you don't want those busts to be the norm, right? I had a client who they were always adjusting their costs, and their profit margins would go up and down on that same job. It's like, what is going on? Why is this happening? So, so that becomes the surety's blueprint, if you want to call it, in order to extend surety credit. So if you have a contractor that does really well on like projects under 5 million, but then all their projects over 5 million, they have profit fades all the time. That gives you like, hey, you do really well here, but you're not really good in this area here. What's going on? And so especially if a contractor wants to grow and they want to take on larger jobs, the WIP is going to show that they can successfully complete those jobs profitably. And if they have a loser job, to recognize it right away. I mean, you have to recognize the loss right away and talk about it right away. So the WIP is extremely important. I'm probably not touching on some other things about the WIP, like underbillings and stuff like that are really critical.
I was talking to a fractional CFO and she told me something about it that stuck to my mind and heart. One report to rule them all. This is my last question to you, Margie. For CFOs, controllers, or project executives listening, what's one practice they can implement this month that would immediately make them more attractive to sureties?
I would say to the CFO, the controllers, or anybody in that seat, ensure that your WIPs tie back to your financials. Make sure the over and under billings tie to the balance sheet. Make sure that the revenue, cost, and profit tie to the income statement. Just make sure that that whole financial package ties together, and make comments ahead of time. So if you see that, because everything's a point in time. So if you're looking at a September Q3 financial and you're just now giving it to the surety, well, 2 months have gone by already, a little more than 2 months. So make a comment, like especially if there was like a large underbilling on the September, you can say, here's our September numbers, but hey, that underbilling on that job, it's now an overbilled. We caught up on the billing in November. So just make comments ahead of time, because what happens is as soon as you hand that over, we're going to look it over and we're going to start asking questions, but you already know that person in that seat already knows what's transpired from September to now. So just add the comments on there. So those would be the two things: making sure everything ties out and tracks properly, and make comments on the outliers or the red flags that could be discussed, because they're going to get discussed. So
Yeah. If they're not telling you, you're going to find it out.
yeah, it's pretty obvious. Like you can.
Margie, thank you so much for being on the show. I enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to Finance at the Job Site. If you found today's conversation valuable, share it with a teammate and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. You can listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or watch on YouTube. Just search Finance at the Job Site. Until next time, here is to building smarter, faster, and more profitable projects.